I love myself. I love myself. Y'all make sure you put your chapstick on, y'all. It's starting to get warm. It's a lot of chapped lips out there. Make sure you use your chapstick. But you are now watching Juke Boy Sports Show. I am your host, Kyng Ralph, and you're in for another high energy, action packed episode. But hope everybody's doing good out there in TV land. And you know how we always do. Before we get started, make sure we just shoot a shout out to the sponsors. You know what I mean? Call the number on the bottom of the screen if you ever want to do a photo shoot, music video, podcast like what you're watching. Call 707 Fitboxer. And if you're looking for a clean, jitterless, no crash energy drink, get on your iPads, computers, phones, type in DUBBYW.com. Use promo code JUKE for 20% off. They're going to get you right. And while you're here, if you can like, subscribe, comment, share, all that good stuff, need the interaction. The purpose of the show and the format of the show is supposed to be a little bit more interactive, given the format that we have. Write in comments if you got ideas or things that you want to talk about on the show, or even if you want to get reactions on the show. But if you're here on YouTube, Juke Network, subscribe at Juke Network. You can follow us at Juke Network as well on Facebook. Also, you can use Ralph, get it together, bro. But you can follow us at Juke Sports Show on Instagram as well. You can follow me at KYNGRALPH and TikTok, Instagram, Twitch, at an underscore for X or Twitter. And we're going to leave that there. But while we get into it, man, Brock Purdy is up. He's up next pretty much. And it's time to have that conversation. Should the 49ers pay Brock Purdy $50 million? That is pretty much where the market says for a starting quarterback in the NFL. When you really start to have the conversation, you really got to start to look at what other people are making. Like, for instance, Dak is making $60 million a year for the Cowboys. Josh Allen and Joe Burrow are tied for the second most at $55 million. Lamar Jackson is making $52 million, and Jalen Hurts is making $51 million. Mind you, Mahomes is, at the time when he signed it, seemed like a wild contract, but he's making $45 million a year. And this is the part for me where I look at your talent and the talent around you. Brock Purdy has not showed the ability to lead a team of kind of like Josh Allen. Like Josh Allen proved today or this year that 55 mil, he's worth every penny of it, because if he doesn't have a Stephon Diggs, a Gabe Davis, and a slew of weapons, all he really needed this year was decent receivers, a good running game, and a solid tight end. And he was able to win an MVP off of that and get to the AFC Championship game. Can Brock Purdy have a George Kittle, some decent receivers, and a Christian McCaffrey and get to an NFC Championship game? I don't believe he can. And this is where we start to have that conversation of like a Sam Darnold. Not to compare Brock Purdy to Sam Darnold. Brock Purdy is much more accomplished than Sam Darnold. But when we have that conversation of the realm of quarterback Sam Darnold is 35 mil a year, 35 mil, I think that's where Sam Darnold is. I really think that Sam Darnold more so is around Justin Fields and what kind of deal that he signed, 2 years, 40 mil, 30 mil guaranteed. I really think that Sam Darnold is around that ilk of quarterback. Because I would prefer Brock Purdy to sign a 30, 35 mil, 40 mil at most a year contract, because you're going to need pieces around him in order for him to be the most successful that he could be. He doesn't have crazy arm talent. He is accurate. needs to be a little better when it comes to protecting the football. And he doesn't have all of these crazy measurables to where if you don't have your super friends, like he literally has Christian McCaffrey, who is, when healthy, a top 3 running back. He has George Kittle, who is, to me, the best tight end in football, as a complete package. You have Brandon Ayuk. He had Debo Samuels. Jennings, when he was playing, he played well when healthy. I feel like he has weapons out there to where it's like, all right, can he carry a team that doesn't have much out there? I don't think he can. So I would prefer save a 10 mil, save a 15 mil on that type of deal and use that to get another piece, or at least 2 more pieces, given the situation. Now you could probably use it and get a top flight piece that, depending on what position that he plays. But as far as 15 mil, you can put that toward building out a team where if he doesn't have it on a bad day, the rest of the team could pick it up. And so there's been some losses on this team where it leads to the question: how has the window closed? Greenlaw, Hufanga go to the Broncos. There's a backup tackle, Elijah Mitchell, the running back, left as well. And I know usage got released. And then there's one more person. Oh, Charvarius Ward, he ends up leaving as well. Debo Samuels was traded. So you're gonna have to you're gonna get the answer to this question real soon. Brock Purdy's deal is up, so you've got to pay him his money. And has the window closed? There's so many different questions that I've asked just in this that's going to be answered soon. So Brock Purdy's going to have to prove, can he carry a team that doesn't have the super friends, given how many players left? Ayuk is coming back from injury after tearing his ACL. Debo gets traded. The fullback usage gets released. Elijah Mitchell is left. Now, if Christian McCaffrey gets hurt, what is Brock Purdy really going to do in this situation? And so they got to pay him his money, but what can he really do with it? And then now it leads to the question, like, has the window closed for the 49ers? And that's the thing for me. I feel like they'll still be good, because I just feel like Brock Purdy's not that bad to where when he doesn't have those guys, is he going to go out there and lay an egg? I don't think that. I do think that he's just not going to get them to the point where they're championship contenders. I feel like he can get them to the playoffs. I feel like he can get them at least where they're in contention for their division. But the conference, I don't personally see it. I could be wrong. Sometimes I am wrong. Not very often. But I do think that the window has closed from a contender standpoint, like a legitimate contender standpoint. I do feel like they'll be competitive. The Rams got a really young defense, brought back Matt Stafford, brought in Devontae Adams, still got Puka Nacua, Kyron Williams at running back. I feel like the Rams are going to be the best team in that division, but you do have a good young Cardinals team. Signed Josh Sweat. We'll see how good he is when he has to be the premier pass rusher on a defense. But I do think that the premier team and the elite team in that conference or in that division is the Rams. We'll see what it looks like when it gets onto the field, though. And so Steph Curry, I've been hearing this conversation for a while now, and even over the last couple of years, it's been getting intensified. And is or should Steph Curry be a part of the GOAT conversation? I'm going to say this right here and now. No hate or shade towards Steph. But when we start to have this conversation, I think he's an all-time great. And I think he has changed the way basketball has been played. Whether you think that is good or bad is a whole nother conversation. He's definitely changed the way that the game is played, the way that teams are being built, what type of guard that we look for coming out in the draft, that I do personally feel like it's he is an all-time great, but he's not in the GOAT conversation. I feel like when we start to have these conversations, we got to look at the totality of someone's career. If we can't just ignore the first 5 years of his career, not to say that he was a bum of any sort. He still had decent stats. In his first 5 years, he averaged 19 and a half points, 6.5 assists, and about 3 to 4 rebounds a game, couple steals a game. But if you go back and look at the way that teams talked, the way that the league looked at him and the way teams talked about him, they were this close to trading him. And the only reason it didn't happen is because of his ankle situation, and the Bucks ended up taking Monte Ellis instead of Steph. But really, Steph was supposed to be the one in that trade. And so everything works out the way it's supposed to work out. His ankle injuries, we stopped talking about that. Eventually, he became the best shooter of all time. And now we forget how he kind of struggled his first 5 years in the league, where that fifth year is when he really broke through, second team All-NBA, MVP voting opportunities, as well as an all-star berth. And so then eventually they make it to the Western Conference Finals. They lose, fire Mark Jackson, and then Steph wins the MVP, and it's gone on from there. But I do think that when we start to really talk about someone's career as in the totality of it, we can't ignore the first 5 where we questioned his greatness at that time, to just pinpoint the past 11 years of his 16-year career, where Kareem has been successful all through his career. Magic Johnson successful from the get-go to the last day he played in the league. Michael Jordan, before he even won a legitimate playoff berth or even a playoff series, 3-4 years into his career, Larry Bird's already calling him Jesus with a basketball or with sneakers on. Then Shaq, the dominant player that he was, Kobe, after 2-3 years, finally hit his stride and then took over from there. And then LeBron. But then when we start to just look at their bodies of work, I just don't feel like you can be a GOAT if you're a liability on defense. And it wasn't until like 5 years ago is when you were able to stop really attacking him, unless you had a guard that really could go at him. Like early in his career, Russ, D Rose before he got hurt, Kyrie. If you had a guard that can really go after Steph was susceptible to give up. He's gonna give up 30, 40 to an elite guard, but what he does on the offensive end kind of overshadows what he does, how his liability and the lack of defense that he offers. Then he gives you effort, but he's still just going to get worked out. And that's the part for me that when we have these conversations of GOAT, I just don't think his offense is that much better than a Magic Johnson, a Mike, a Kobe, LeBron, or even Kareem, to just throw him in this GOAT conversation. I feel like at some point, if you got 7 people, there's not 7 GOATs. You got 5 people that really have a legitimate conversation as far as the GOAT conversation. And at that point, everybody else, not to take away from their greatness, they're just really good basketball players. All-time greats. But when you're the GOAT, if there's 100 players, there's 2 or 3 that really have an opportunity to really put their name in that hat. And I just don't think Steph can get there unless he has another 3 to 4 years of being the guy and them getting the Western Conference Finals, or even if they win another title with him being the guy, then maybe that conversation changes. But when we're really having this conversation of GOATs, I can't ignore his first 5 years to just pay attention to the last 11 years, especially when he has some flawed basketball within that time period. But I'm going to come off as a hater because I guess I care too much about defense. And so LeBron, it was in the news, LeBron confronts Stephen A. Smith courtside at an LA Lakers game. Middle of the third quarter, walks up to Stephen A. Hey, bruh, leave my son the fuck alone. Stop talking about my son. Stephen A. goes on Gil's Arena today and say, hey, it's never really about your son. It's when he was in high school, you said that he could start, or there's so many players that he's better than right now in the league. Then you go as far as saying you want him going to your team. Then when instead of, all right, cool, you got an opportunity to play a game with him, everything, the hoopla behind that, it was a little scripted, but hey, neither here nor there. We're happy for you. Get that moment. That's a dope moment. If any of us that got sons, if we had an opportunity to play with our son on an NBA team, all of us would take that opportunity. But you do that, then he's supposed to be a G League player. But now, because of your leverage, you're able to have him on an NBA roster. Now, everything that's behind it, Bronny, when he was a freshman in college, literally had a heart attack and almost died while practicing. I get why LeBron is doing some of the things, but you can't ignore that and just be like, for the sake of, oh, we can't talk about that because of the sensitivity to things. No, bro, like you said that he was one of the, that he could start and play over NBA players. Then when he gets to the league, for whatever reason, the things that I mentioned behind it, yes, he's going to have some setbacks. And I think he does have the potential, but right now he's not that good. And so leads you to the question, whose side are you on? And me personally, I was a huge Stephen A. Smith fan at one point. Over the last couple of years, he does some things that kind of get on my nerves. But I do think that what he's done in this industry has done a lot, even for people like me. But I do think I agree with him on this one. I think that if you look at all of the facts of the conversation, LeBron is not the first person to have a son play in the league. But when you go and you look at the people that have had kids that are in the league, even just currently, Tim Hardaway Sr. has Tim Hardaway Jr., Kenyon Martin has Kenyon Martin Jr., Gil has a son going into college, going to USC. Melo has a son has Kyng going to Syracuse. There's the Seth Currys, the Steph Currys, and so on and so forth. Nobody has really put their leverage to make sure that their son gets drafted. Now, when it goes down to it, if he had just never done anything to make sure his son get drafted or make sure certain teams didn't draft him, because I do think that Bronny would have gotten drafted regardless, even though he had the issue, because his athleticism for the size and that he is, I think that people are going to jump at that opportunity. He had long arms, good defender with a decent jump shot. Now, I do think that there's certain parts of his game that needed to be developed, and I don't have a problem with him being drafted at all. I just think that the way that the whole situation went down. Then to go back to when he was in high school, LeBron says that he could be playing over legitimate NBA players right now. Then he goes to college, has the heart issue, doesn't play for a while, finally gets to play, doesn't really like turn any heads, but he's literally coming off of a heart attack where he almost died, like during practice. So then instead of giving him another year to get comfortable, you go into the draft. LeBron goes and says, oh, if you draft my son, I'll be there. So, but then it goes right before the draft. Now I want him to be a Laker. And he tells teams, don't draft him. I want him to be a Laker. So then the Lakers eventually do draft him with the 55th pick. But then it's like everything that went into it as a 55th pick, he really shouldn't have too much pressure on him. You're the end of the second round, middle to end of the second round, you really shouldn't have that much pressure. But because of everything that LeBron has said and done for his son, and that's not the part that we blame him for, but you can't ignore why the criticism has come so harshly, because one, you're LeBron, so people are going to hate you. It's just the same thing for like Dion and Shador. People hate Dion, so they're going to can't really say much toward him, so we're going to attack someone who is a little bit more flawed, Shador. Can't really attack LeBron because 21 years, 41 years old, 40 years old, still averaging 25, 8 and 8, multiple MVPs, multiple championships, all NBAs, all-star appearances, the record score. There's not too many things there, so I can attack Bronny. And so, but then that plus you're not really helping his development from a media standpoint to him as a player, because he should be in the G League honing his skills. And we've seen when he was in the G League, he started to get a little better, a little bit more comfortable, being more aggressive as a scorer, but he's just not ready for the NBA yet. And that's the part for me that as a fan, like as a dad, I don't blame him at all, but for what he's doing. But from a fan and an NBA analyst, you're not really doing him any favors by having him with you on a day-to-day basis. Really should go to the G League, work on his craft. And so Steph Curry, I brought him up earlier. Steph Curry is accepting an assistant GM role at the University of Davidson, which is where his alma mater is. We've already seen this from the ilk of the Stanford hiring Andrew Luck, as he is the GM in totality. So Steph, his wife, Don, Matt, and Erica Berman are putting their money together, and they're going to have an 8-figure fund for both men and women's programs for the University of Davidson. I believe Matt Berman was a former soccer player for the university. And so it leads to the question, is this a game changer for college sports? And I think it can be. When you really think about certain schools and their ties and how it is, what the culture of college sports is now, it's pay to play. And when you can have up to a $10 million budget to be able to throw a couple thousand here, maybe $1 million here, couple 100,000 of this player, you can build out teams where you're starting to see, I think it's Underwood, the schools that he ended up going to, it pretty much he went to the highest bidder. There's a young kid that went to Utah. They're giving him like $5-6 mil just to play at Utah for 1 year because he's going to the league. And I think that when you have that type of money to be able to shift that and throw that at a college kid, Davidson could end up being a power from a basketball standpoint. But it's more than just like men's and women's basketball. It's men's and women's sports programs as a whole. But I don't really necessarily know the figures and what other sports like swimming or tennis and golf, what those numbers pull in as far as those players. But when you have someone like basketball, how much money that drives in, football, how much money that drives in, I think that you're able to get a better quality of athlete to come to your school. But if you can get, let's just say, how many NBA players went to North Carolina, football players that went to North Carolina, Clemson, the Georgias, Auburn, Ohio State, Michigan, to be able to get a group of players to put money toward whether your boosters are now former athlete or current athletes or primetime athletes making a lot of money to help boost your program. I think in the end, this could be a complete game changer because Steph knows what good basketball is and what good basketball is not. Work ethic. He can be a tutor and mentor to a lot of young kids. So I do think that like this is really dope. I do appreciate the way that this is going. I think it's a little bit of a little slippery slope because throwing too much money at a young kid, they can feel like they made it. But in the end, I do think that this could lead things in the right direction for some smaller schools that have people that have made a lot of money to become better programs. So leading up to the fast break, as we get ready to end the show, Oh, oops. I talked about that one a little early. But hey, like I said, Steph is not an all-time. He's an all-time great, but he's not one of the GOATs. And Joey Bosa was released by the Los Angeles Chargers, the end of an era. He was the last player to play for the San Diego Chargers and still be on the roster. I think it's a little wild when you sit back and you go through like certain things of thinking about the Rams now that they're in LA. They were in LA when I was born. They play in St. Louis for almost 20 years and go back to LA. It's like there's going to be people that don't realize like the Raiders were in LA before they went back to Oakland. There's going to be people that once after a while not going to realize that the Raiders were once in Oakland before they went to Vegas. And so to think about like the Chargers and how many great players play for the San Diego Chargers and people are not even realize that these Chargers that are in LA were once in San Diego. It is a little crazy, like Seattle, the Seattle Sonics moving to Oklahoma City. I seen this really cool conversation where Gary Payton talked about how he doesn't want his jersey retired by Oklahoma City Thunder because he never played in Oklahoma City as I think he might have played as like a what do you call it? I think he might have played like on other teams, but he definitely didn't play for them once they moved from Seattle to Oklahoma. And so end of an era for the San Diego Chargers. Joey Bosa got released. He was the last of the Mohicans. And shout out to Eddie George. If you know, he pretty much followed in the footsteps of prime Deion Sanders and was the head coach at Tennessee State and HBCU. Hey. How you doing, Tasha? But shout out to Eddie George, coach of HBCU. Hate to see him go, but he is taking a better opportunity coaching the Bowling Green, going to a mid-major and getting a little bit better budget. He's talked about the budget at the HBCU. This is another thing to go back to that conversation. When you have players or people that come from these programs, if they can put the money back into it, we always talk about as a Black community, put money back into our community. This is an opportunity to be able to, as long as the school does the right thing, because heard about what happened with Ed Reed and I forgot what HBCU it was, but pretty much he took the opportunity to try to coach a football team, a college football team, and they just didn't have the budget to be able to do the things that he wanted to do. But then it was like came down to it. They had the budget, but they just refused to put money into it. And so if you have players, people that have financial success, any kind of sports athletes or anything, all the Black people that talk about certain HBCUs, put the money back into these programs, they can end up being a powerhouse just like anybody else. But shout out to Eddie George, one of my favorite running backs from the 2000s, taking his mind and experience and giving it back to the kids. Hate to see him leave HBCU, but I do like the opportunity that he's getting from a coaching standpoint. And just the last little bit before I got to get up out of here, the gamble to trade Luka and put your franchise in the hands of Anthony Davis and Kyrie Irving, not looking good so far. Don't really have the record in front of me, but they're slowly slipping out of playoff contention. Kyrie tore his knee up. Anthony Davis has yet to play outside of that first game for the Dallas Mavericks, and the Lakers are second in the West. Now LeBron is not playing; he's in and out of the lineup, and they're coming off of a loss to Brooklyn, but it just doesn't look good unless you slip enough, get a lottery pick, and now you can kind of package a big three of some sort, or hit on a lottery pick to partner with Kyrie and Anthony Davis. But so far, not looking good for the Dallas Mavericks. And like I said at the beginning, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, share. I do appreciate you. Miss Tasha, for chiming in. You always give me the engagement and the interaction. I do appreciate you. But hit that subscribe button, follow. You can subscribe at Juke Network. Trying to get to 100 subscribers by June. I'm slowly working my way there towards 70. I'm at about like 68 subscribers right now. You can follow me as well on Twitch at KYNGRALPH. Follow us on at Juke Sports Show on Instagram, Juke Network on Facebook. Once I get that page to 100 followers, I'll be able to go full time. I'll be able to go live on that straight from that page. So I could drop the He Say, She Say channel, move everything on over. And thank you all for watching. I do got to get up out of here. But drink your water and mind your business.